Welcome to this excellent new talk we have today with so many of the top architects in the city, talking about one of the most exciting projects coming up. My name is Ash Navabi. I'm an economist at UrbanToronto.ca, and we'd like to thank our partners at Informa Connect for helping us organize this. And I will be giving you a brief introduction about what Urban Toronto is and what we do. And then I'll be throwing it over to Craig, who will start the discussions more thoroughly. So, just a bit of housekeeping. This is not for us. Great. So Urban Toronto is a website. It's the premier website for the construction industry in the GTA. This is our 20th year in business. We started off as a forum, which grew then into a news website, which then grew into our data services. Our forum is different from Reddit or Twitter, etc., because people actually within our forum, about 1/3 of our users actually are in the industry. So they're seasoned veterans, they're urban planners, they're construction managers, they're well-known architectural critics, etc. So they know what they're talking about. They've been through the process. They really know the business inside and out. We also have daily articles, multiple daily articles every day, talking about the latest developments in the city, as well as anything to do with construction development and the politics around the industry. Our forum is about 40,000 registered users. As I mentioned, 1/3 are in the industry. We have several different forums. Buildings is our most active one. That's where all the construction talk is. We have the real estate forum where we talk about sales and pricing. We talk about transportation separately, and we have other forums that talk about international developments, politics, you name it. We've had 100 new threads made in June. It's very active. 9,000 posts. Hundreds of images of construction as it's happening in the city. You're not going to get this sort of detailed information anywhere else in any other platform, either in the GTA or anywhere else in the world, to be quite honest. UT Pro is our data service. We have a database. We've been building a database to track. Initially started off to help track discussions within the forum, and now it's spun off into its own service. We have individual project databases, 4,000 different projects. We also track developers, architects, etc. It's a big yellow pages for the construction industry. Each different project has 60 fields. We track 12 different municipalities in the GTA, and we're still expanding. And we track every project from the application stage up through construction, and we track application dates, zoning dates, site plan approvals, new building permits, demolition permits, all that stuff is in there. So you're not going to get this information, especially for historical projects, older projects. You're not going to get this from the city website. You're not going to get this information from many other services that they just don't track this information. Of course, everybody here is interested in the Well. The Well is this big, really interesting project happening. It's mixed use. It's happening right at the front and Spadina, which is in the entertainment district area of the city. It used to be another building owned by the Globe and Mail. Craig will talk about this more, but this is the information we have on it. It's multiple buildings. The tallest one is going to be 46 stories, 287,000 square meters of GFA. That's about 3 million square feet, 1,500 dwelling units. A lot of that is going to be purpose-built rental. And we have information about who the developers are. You know, all the architects are going to be talking today. It was initially submitted. The first proposal was submitted in 2014. And right now it's still under construction, but it's gotten to the point now where you can walk through the construction site. It's looking beautiful. I've been through it. It's wonderful. Our forum members are going through it. Comments are glowing. You can see the photos. It's really spectacular. And you'll be seeing more about it coming up. Next up is Craig White, our managing editor at Urban Toronto.
Hi, welcome everybody. We want to get in depth with a number of the architects that have helped conceive and bring the well into reality. such a huge project. It has involved many, many firms, and we have people from 5 of those firms today. Just going to take a look quickly at the main rendering from the south, from what's being built at the moment. You'll see that coming up a little later, how far we've gotten with that. This image shows the corner from Spadina and front looking northwest towards the office tower and down towards some of the apartment towers along Front Street. The interior space is covered with a giant canopy skylit, which will soon be filling up with retail spaces. And then let's go all the way back to the beginning. Front and Spadina, on the upper, sort of the middle right area of this slide, you can see red brick building in front there where Stantec and Adamson architects are, and in around that space, before you get to the GO tracks, obviously there's a GO train going through there, is where the Globe and Mail used to have their offices and printing plant. And they have since moved out, and a huge tract of land with I think it was 18 acres, a small low-rise buildings on it, was highly underused. And so after being bought by RioCan, and RioCan brought in Allied for offices, and Tridel and Woodburn for residential, and all of this, along with Diamond Corp as well. Plans were hatched. This is how far we have come now. This is a shot in May looking north at the buildings, and we are going to dive in. We will be speaking variously to Alex Richter from Adamson Associates, who's done a huge amount of coordinating work on all of that, and he'll get into that. Adam Feldman from Architects Alliance, who have designed the buildings, the residential buildings along Front Street. We'll be talking to Rod Pell from Wellman Architects, who've designed the residential buildings along Wellington Street. We'll be talking with Adrian Price of BDP, who has brought the whole retail experience and to all of this. And we'll be starting and coming back to later with Michael Conway of Hariri Poncherini Architects, who were first approached by the developers to envision what could be built here, and then ended up also designing the office tower later on. So Michael, take it away.
Great, thank you, Craig. So let me just flip this through. So we were engaged with RioCan, Allied, and Diamond Corp in 2012 to start looking at the master plan for the former Globe and Mail's lands. So at this time, the partnership that came together on it, their vision for the site was a legacy project for this large area within downtown Toronto. So at the time that we started it, we were the master plan architects. Claude Cormier was the landscape, and then Urban Strategies was brought on as planning. At the time we started the project, our office was located at the corner of King and Portland Street. We had just moved in a few years before starting it. So everyone, I'm sure, is familiar with the vibrancy of the King West neighborhood. What we started in 2012 was we started looking at King and Portland Center, as well as starting on the Well. So it was kind of an interesting bookend to the King West neighborhood of being able to look at two of the cornerstones of the neighborhood. So one of the things that really define the King West neighborhood is these really large former industrial blocks. But as you start to move through it, when you're walking, you quickly realize that it is a very porous neighborhood that is like interconnected through a series of laneways and passageways that link all of these different blocks together. So when we started looking at King and Portland, one of the ideas was really trying to pick up this idea of this internal block network. And then as we started looking at bookending it with the well, it was really looking at taking these cues from the vibrancy and stuff that was starting to happen within King Street West, and really start to move that logic down through the well. So one of the first things that we started to look at was just walking through the neighborhood. It does have like a look and feel that is quite different from a lot of the different districts within Toronto. So we started to document some of these passageways and laneways, and started putting dimensions to it and number of stories to kind of get a sense of what it was about these spaces that kind of held like a very strong fascination within this part of town, as well as these spaces that started to emerge in between it. So we started to see these hidden terraces, these laneway terraces, as well as these really unexpected moments that took place around some of these corners. So one of the first things that we started to do also was engage with the community. With the community, what we put together this drawing as what we called it "What We Heard," which was three main ideas that we really wanted to push onto the site as we started to look at how we can start to define and develop the master plan for the Globe and Mail. So the first thing was really this site wanted to be part of the King West neighborhood. So looking at tying into the existing laneways that are happening within King Street, and then really drawing it back towards it. The second was connecting the Victoria Memorial Park with Clarence Square. And then the third was bringing Draper Street into the development, or through the development, as a way of connecting it to Spadina. At the same time, we started looking at trying to define it as what we wanted it, and then also what it wasn't. So some of the early thinking on it is that it's not the financial district. It's King Street West. It's a vibrant mix of post and beam brick buildings that has a vibrancy morning, noon, and night. The second was that it's not a shopping mall. We started to look towards European examples of what we were calling urban retail. The partnership from the start ended up going to the UK to visit a lot of these mixed-use sites that were starting to be developed in the downtown as a way of revitalizing some of the older downtowns within the UK. That started to bring together retail and mixed-use elements to it. So looking at the initial floor plan or ground floor plan concept that we started to look at was incorporating these elements. So the first one is tying in these laneways from the existing King West neighborhood. The second was Claude Cormier started looking at connecting the parks through what we're terming a barbell park. And then the third was this idea of the spine moving through the center of the project. So from the start of this, it was really seen as in order for the retail to work, it needed to land right on the corner. So to bring people in from the corner of Spadina and Front Street. So one of the things that was kind of interesting with where we started to arc it was it allowed the buildings to have different characters within the master plan. So the Wellington buildings had a smaller scale that responded a lot more to the post and beam industrial buildings that are located along Wellington Street, but also opening up to these larger blocks towards the south that could incorporate larger retail. And then the second floor what we needed to do was we needed to create, in order for the retail to work on it, we needed to create a racetrack that connected all of the second floor retail together. So one of the ideas that we started pushing on it was rather than having this as exterior to the buildings, if we push it into the building as a colonnade and then use a series of bridges as a connection between the buildings really do have this free-form positioning within the master plan where it is just connected by bridges. And then finally, we put together as we started to move past the rezoning or into the rezoning, it started to get divided up into multiple architects to really create that look and feel that's very much important within a city where it's not designed by one hand, but a collection of multiple architects working together. So HPA had worked on the office building at 8 Spadina. Architects Alliance had done the residential buildings along Front Street. Rudy Wollman Architects did the residential along Wellington. BDP had looked at all of the retail, and Adamson had looked at all of the below grade as well as all of the commercial aspects of the project. And I will pass that over to, sorry, who's next?
Sorry about that. My mic was off, Michael. We're going to go to Alex Richter at Adamson now to talk about the coordination effort as well that Adamson had to handle here to make all these pieces work.
Okay. I am going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Can you all see that sunset shot?
Quick question, Natalie, is that being presented on the main screen or are we seeing the slide still? All right, we may have a technical issue here for the moment.
No, I think it's up there. It looks good, Alex.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so my name's Alex Richter, Associate Principal at Adamson Associates, and we were the architect of record and executive architect for the base building of the well. And I'd like to start off, first of all, thank yous to the client and all the architects, because a project of this size, shape, and complexity certainly would not have been possible without their commitment and vision. And a lot of, I'd say, the transformative nature of this project, but what I wanted to focus on was how our firm handles a project of this size, shape, and complexity. In other words, how do we set it up? How do we manage the talent, the ideas, and the vision in order to bring it to completion? And the first thing I wanted to do when talking about that was just talk about scale. And when I was putting this presentation together, I was struck by how closely it resembled a ship. And so I thought, oh, let's see how this thing compares. So if the well measures, the site measures 125 by 250 meters, and it would easily fit the USS Intrepid, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and the QEW-2 on a diagonal. And I think it's fair to say that it would probably include the volume of both these buildings easily, and certainly required the same amount of commitment, complexity, and probably funding. So as far as the project statistics, now here's two images which basically show one of our working drawings of the below grade and an image of the project once it was well under construction. So as Craig mentioned at the beginning, it's 7.7 acres with an overall footprint of 29,000 square meters, well over 300,000 square feet. There are 7 buildings, the tallest of which is Building G. There's 7 basement levels. let's call it 148,000 square feet of office. Let's call it 1.5 million square feet of office, about 1.5 million square feet of residential. Total overall area is 3 million, probably close to 4 with the basements. 1,662 parking spots, probably one of the largest parking garages in the city. 30 loading bays and 2,600 bikes. Very large program. By the way, I think it's worth noting that the project does, in fact, include a well, which you can see here is that round circular shape, which is a 75-foot deep well, which provides deep water cooling from end wave. So as far as, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the org chart. And an org chart is often looked deceptively simple, but are a critical element to organizing the team, the players, the stakeholders. And this basically shows how we organize the project and the people who are involved. So there's a tripartite owner, RioCan, Allied, and Diamond. We, as the executive architects, coordinated a number of consultants as well as the owner's consultants. And the consultants end up being divided into design, basically 4 designers, 4 prime engineers, and a number of specialist consultants. So 1 executive architect, 2 contractors, 3 owners, 4 architects, 9 owners consultants, and 27 prime and specialist consultants. So a large group of contributors and stakeholders that need to be managed and organized. And another tool that really becomes indispensable in terms of organizing a project like this is a clear schedule. And ultimately, a project of this nature probably turns into a schedule with thousands of line items. But in order to manage a team, I think one of our ultimate goals is to break it down into simple, understandable schedules, durations, and milestones. And for us, it's always, there's a design schedule, there's a number of construction packages, there's a zoning, a path that we have to follow through zoning, a site plan approval, building permits, and construction. And interestingly enough, so what was challenging here was the schematic design development, CD were really 4, 5, and 9 months. So managing 7 buildings within these timeframes was very challenging, and how the building permits dropped out of that. And interestingly enough, this was done in 2016, but I think we ended up being very, very close to this completion date. So, I think we got lucky, and thanks to the skill of a lot of people. Another indispensable tool that we use to organize a project is called the responsibility matrix. And this is something we've been doing as a firm for quite a long time, but this is a tool that we use where we organize all of the stakeholders across the top, and we basically take the phases of the project, STD, CD, specs, approvals, bidding, negotiation. We take them down the left-hand side, and every single individual company is assigned a role. Prime, support, review, no role, not applicable, and this ultimately becomes let's call it the project genome. It's almost like the DNA for the project, and becomes an indispensable tool in organizing who does what at the beginning of a project. We call projects like this, they're very similar to what we call super tankers. You got to load them up right at the beginning of the job, because once it leaves the port, it's very hard to turn around and go for more gas or supplies. So once again, how do you do a project of this size, shape, and complexity? It's by breaking it down into understandable, manageable pieces. And in a project like this, it basically organized itself into 4 teams. There was the Building A team, which basically developed the drawings for the buildings on Wellington, which were of similar size, shape, and complexity, range from 12 to 15 stories. What we call Buildings D and E, the 2 buildings on Front Street, and then finally the office component, the high-rise office component, F and G, and it all boils down to people. This was Anna, Rasha, Navjit, Steve, and everybody contributes to a typical set of details. So in other words, that becomes our toolkit of typical details, which we can then distribute, organize at the beginning of the project, and we use those as a kind of a toolkit throughout. Now, something that we were asked by the client to do, which we don't normally do, but it's something called the stratification in stratification drawings. And it was a very, very interesting exercise because at the end of the day, this project organized itself into what ended up being 14 buildings, and I'm going to get to that, or 14, let's call it 14 different properties. And, you know, each one of these is identified with a color, but stratification became very important because at the end of the day, the residential component, which I will get to later, which was organized on top of the office buildings, everybody needed an easement over somebody else's property. And it became a very complex exercise. This was ultimately handed to the surveyors, and they said that this was the most complicated set of strata drawings they'd ever done. And we were lucky enough for it to be our first. And this is a section which also becomes a representation of the strata drawings, but becomes a very useful tool because it basically shows our scope of work. And our scope of work, Adams & Associates as the base building architects, was limited to this horizontal line. And the residential buildings above this line, which were separated by a transfer slab, which I will get into, were done by Wellman and AA. And we basically, so what ended up happening was that we had to coordinate all of the services, access, elevators, vertical transportation, utilities, you name it, to come into the site and be prepared to accept these buildings. So it literally became a plug and play type of scenario. So another indispensable tool when we talk about how do we manage the design, the schedule, the phasing, an indispensable tool with this project was the use of a transfer slab, which we worked on with RJC. And here you basically see a representation of how those work. So the transfer slab became incredibly useful because it allowed the designers of the residential buildings to continue designing as let's call it the circuit board or the base building continued. It allowed them to continue designing, identify different shear wall options, which for the suites. It also allowed us to go to a wider column grid underneath, which was more appropriate for office buildings as well as the spaces that were in the podium and in the retail spaces. And then these loads end up basically become transferred to the transfer slab. We also had a transfer zone in here for the utilities, where utilities were capped, and it allowed these two very disparate aspects of the site to continue and march independently. And it allowed the residential buildings to come along at any time in the future. However, at this point in this project, they all marched in sync. The below grade levels, this is basically a very high-level representation of, let's call it, the underworld that's used to support a project like this. And one item worth noting was that the volume and the amount of air that was required to support the project required a trench, basically a 30-foot wide ventilation trench at the very lowest level, so that we could isolate the intake and the exhaust to single large ventilation outlets. And in this corner, we also had the N-wave well. Now, basically, P6, the residential parking organized itself very nicely into the lower level so that you could go down a ramp, swipe your card. Actually, it was a proximity detector, so that you continue down and you can get right into the parking, which are these colors. Office parking was located above that. It's closer to the office buildings. And then these colors basically show how the residential elements of the site, became distributed throughout the project. And I thought it's worth showing this level because once we identified exactly what it took to service a project like this, we realized very early on that this will need a dedicated service level, providing, for access for type A, B, C, and D trucks as well. So 30 vehicles, they come down the ramp, and every single core and every single residential building basically had its own loading, bikes, storage, moving, waste, and you basically, the vehicle servicing these can easily identify and use each one of these with the office building located to the east. And this is another representation of what we call the circuit board or the plug and play. So in principle, these colors here basically represent the residential buildings coming down, and these are enlarged plans of these sections. So as Adamson Associates and our base building consultants, we coordinated with the residential architects to develop the cores so that they could be developed and fitted out at a later date. So we basically drew all of the cores, utilities, and vertical elements that could not be built at a later date so that they could be fit out by the residential team at any point in the future. And this is a horizontal representation of how this works. So basically, the buildings plug in above the transfer slab and continue down to the basement where you basically have the cores and they access the parking levels. These are some sections of what we call the grid shell canopy. And the grid shell canopy was a project unto itself. We worked very closely with RJC, EDP to make this happen. We reviewed multiple iterations of ways which the glass could be optimized in terms of bends, size, sheets, and a mock-up of this was built in a chamber in Oshawa so that we could test exactly how the huge amounts of snow and ice that would accumulated could be melted, managed, and moved. And these are some of the images from the testing chamber, as well as some sections. These were massive gutters, 1 meter by a meter by a meter. These are some elevations and sections, of the office building, some quick plans. It was interesting because this was not what it was a rather unconventional office building in terms of its organization of the core and how it was laid out, but very, very successful, provided some really, really amazing spaces. Now, I think I'm probably out of time, so
you are.
We just have, great. Well, I'm done, so I'm ready to move on. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Alex. So, Adam, if you'd like to take over now and tell us about designing the buildings that face Front Street, the residential ones.
Thanks, Craig. Can we see the screen now? We're back to the other slides.
I stopped sharing.
It's
okay,
all of us
perfect.
now, so right. Adam, you can click along on the slides below and hit push to audience whenever you want them up.
Oh, sorry. Are they on the screen now?
We are on the screen now. So click on a slide below the screen, hit push to audience.
So you're going to have to help me with this one.
Okay, I can do the pushing to audience if you'd like.
If you could, that would be great. Just let me know when it's there.
Okay, go ahead.
It's there, great. Okay, thanks, Alex. I'm Adam Feldman from Architects Alliance, and I also have to give credit for this one to Oliver Laumeyer, who is the associate in charge of this project, who worked tirelessly as part of that org chart that Alex showed. And I think Alex hinted at the complexities of this, but it went deeper and deeper and was quite a remarkable endeavor. But he got to talk about that, so I won't. We were tasked with the Front Street residential buildings, and it was An interesting challenge because these buildings didn't touch the ground. You know, normally they're rooted in foundations and everything, but someone else dealt with those. So these are literally towers in the sky. And with them, you know, we worked, two of the buildings were with Tridel, and one of them, the building on the east, was for Woodburn and RioCan. And just in these three buildings, there was about 1 million square feet of residential GFA and about 1,250 residential units, half of which were dedicated rental. And when we came on the job, kind of halfway through, after Michael and HPA did all the heavy lifting of the approvals, we were tasked with trying to find a way to kind of fit these buildings above the kind of office and retail podium. And so the drawing on the screen just shows, you know, ideas of orientation for these large tower footprints. And, you know, as Michael talked about the porosity of the site at grade, you know, the other thing was trying to get the porosity of the views through the site and open up views of the sky and views out of the buildings and across the site. And these are just some of the studies we looked at. The other challenge was, how do you stick a building on top of another building, and what that interface should be. And Alex kind of talked about the structural and mechanical complexities. And for us, it was really, you know, about how to take a large building and have it touch down lightly. And what we ended up with was a sort of sandwich in between, you know, lifting up to expose a sock, so to speak, of these buildings and, you know, working with the other architects, you know, locating amenity spaces for the residential units above and some mechanical spaces for the office buildings below, in between, as a sort of sandwich that allowed these towers to kind of float across the site. And, you know, with that, you know, this is a view from Front Street looking north. And as you can see, the towers step up to the east towards Spadina and down to the west, and the range in height from 22 stories on the west to 46 on the east. The white building on the right is the rental building, the tallest building. And, you know, we looked at, once we kind of resolved the shapes, there was a lot of studies, you know, how to deal with balconies, how to deal with facades, and how to really focus on amenity for the building users, for the residents within them, and looking at views to the city and views around and how they would kind of inhabit that space. And, you know, after many studies and working closely with our clients, you know, we've ended up with the building design, keep hitting the wrong button, that I think is very elegant, you know, and creates this great entry point and the sky view across the site. And this is a marketing rendering from Tridel. And, you know, this is, it's just a similar construction photo from UrbanToronto, remembering what it used to look like as this massive construction site that actually very closely resembles the renderings in the studies. And, you know, it's sort of a very exciting project to be involved with, and just want to thank everyone. And with that, I'll hand it off to Rod.
Hi, Rod. Take it away for Wellington Street now.
Great. Thanks, Greg. So just this image here we're borrowing from one of Michael's presentations. It's a very good representation of the breakdown of the different components and the different designers that were involved in the project. So Wellman began working with Tridel and Woodburn in 2016 to develop the 3 Wellington Street buildings, which are highlighted here in orange. Known as buildings A, B, and C, moving from the left-hand side of the screen to the right. Buildings A and B, the 2 first buildings from left to right, are purpose-built rental buildings of 16 stories with 331 units combined. 171 units in the first building on the right building A, or left building A, and building B with 160 units, and building C, which was developed by and is currently still under construction by Tridel, is a market condo building, 14 stories with 99 units. The scale of these buildings was really derived through the rezoning and urban design process, and with the idea of creating transition from the taller buildings, which are located on the Front Street side, down to the smaller scale buildings which exist on Wellington Street. on the north side of the street. The massing of the buildings as well was derived through that rezoning process and the urban design process with the intent of breaking the scale of the buildings down even further. We've got 3 buildings here, but the intent was to break those facades down into smaller portions. So the residential entrances in the center of each of those buildings was recessed back from the retail frontages to essentially create 6 frontages from a pedestrian scale, which broke again, as I mentioned, down that scale and character of the buildings to closely match the existing buildings of the Wellington Street on the north side. So let's go back here. So that the terrace massing as well was developed through the urban design process and the rezoning process with the intent to minimize shadow impact on the north side of Wellington Street, as well as the building setbacks, which were pushed back from the property lines to align with the existing buildings along the south side of Wellington Street. The Wellington Street buildings as well were also designed to respect the urban design guidelines developed by UrbanToronto through the early days of the development of the site. The podiums themselves were designed to reflect the materials of the existing Wellington buildings with the use of brick to add some texture along the pedestrian frontage. And then the lighter materials used for the white and gray chosen for the upper portions to help emphasize and differentiate it from the podiums below. The facades of each of the buildings were also intended to be designed to have an individual character, but also have a similar architectural language. Building A, which is the building furthest to the left, we designed to have larger 2-story openings or perceived to have 2-story openings. Building B created a vertical expression with 2-story openings in the frames, which were turned vertically to create a running bond pattern. And then building C, similar expression to building B, turned horizontally to create a double bay expression to emphasize the linear nature.
Okay.
Sorry, Craig.
Sorry, just running through a couple more slides there.
Yep.
Rod, are you done with your section?
No, I was just.
No, okay. Keep going. Sorry.
Okay. If there's a time issue, I can try and speed things up.
We do have a time issue, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll try and get through this as quickly as I can then. Just looking here at the residential entrances of each of the buildings, we worked with both Adrian's team at BDP and Alex's team at Adamson to develop these residential entrances along Wellington, trying to create an individual character to each of the buildings while keeping, again, that same architectural expression. Building A creating a vertical expression with these granite projecting fins and a framed portal and canopy. Building B with the vertical metal fins, and building C with the vertical glass fins. Just wanted to touch on the terrace natures of these buildings, which presented some challenges in terms of suite design, as well as the U-shaped floor plate format. But that also gave us the opportunity to create these large outdoor living spaces and the larger units that are generally in each of these 3 buildings. The unit sizes are roughly 900 square feet on average. And again, creating these larger units, family-oriented unit sizes, and these wonderful outdoor living spaces. And I'll just leave it at that, Craig.
Thank you very much, Rod.
Sure.
So along with the residential buildings that line both the north and south sides, on the west side of the site at the southeast corner, there's an office tower, and UrbanToronto took on the job of designing that. So Michael, take it away again.
Great. So I'll make this pretty quick as we are running up against the clock. One of the first questions that we started asking ourselves about the office building on the corner is, what does an office building look like growing out of the vibrancy of the King West neighborhood? So as I mentioned before, it's not a financial district. So we started to explore what the nature of the building is through these diagrams here. So one of the key moves within the site was to have the spine land directly at the corner of Front and Spadina. So in order to do that, a traditional office building with the center core ended up landing right in the middle of that spine. So what we did was we pushed the core to the northern part of the building, creating a side-loaded corridor condition, which allowed for the natural extension of the connection right out to Front and Spadina. The second thing that we did was, when we started to go up with the building, we were running into a bit of an issue where we were creating a shadow on Clarence Square Park. So one of the things that we started to do to mitigate that was to create this very large series of terraces and setbacks. So what ended up happening was we ended up giving 22 minutes of sunshine, adding 22 minutes of sunshine to the park as a result of this stepping. The third move we did was we raised the podium of the building in order to create these large, what we're calling mega floors for the office in the lower portion. The fourth is that we started looking at ways of breaking down the large facades that we were starting to create with the building. So what we started to do was introduce this idea of these city rooms into the facade as a way of helping to break the scale of that down. So one, it helped to break it down, but it also provided these very interesting views out of the building. And then lastly, we greened all of the terrace spaces. So as you can see here with the side-loaded corridor, by pushing it to the north, it started to create an interesting opportunity started to come up with it. First was one of the ideas of being able to utilize this elevator bank as glass elevators. So you can also see on here is the way that the spine naturally lands right at the corner. So what we also did was we looked at the lobby of the main office building as having a Spadina address. So really kind of tucking it in underneath the building, facing Spadina. And then we ended up integrating a small cafe within the retail portion of it. So this is a view from inside the lobby that shows the staircase, the cafe, as well as the main lobby space. Also within here, the furniture that was created, as you can see in the foreground here, these were all reclaimed beams from the existing Globe and Mail building. So we had a furniture maker that ended up taking these beams and created this furniture with it. Wow. And then you can see what it looks like at the Spadina. You can see the entrance into the spine, the main lobby coming down, as well as transitioning into the terracotta with the video frame, and then moving into the heritage building, which is Adamson's office right on the corner. One of the things also with stepping the building back, it created an interesting, for the client really liked this idea of stepping it back, because instead of having 36 floors of the exact same floor plate for them to lease out, over the next 100 years, it allowed for them to have a variety of different size floor plates. So with the starting at the bottom, we have this 70,000 square foot, what we're calling the mega floor plate, moving into a large office plate, which is about 33,000 square feet. And then into the medium office, which is you're close to your traditional 24,000 square foot downtown floor plate. And then finally having these 13,000 square foot boutique floor plates. So looking at all these elements coming together within the elevation, as we noted, we talked about the lobby, the entrance spine. The glass elevators can be seen, especially at night, as they're moving through the elevation, the large terrace setbacks. And then by having the side-loaded corridor, it also allowed for us an opportunity to have a very strong expression of the exit communication stair. So a way of bringing natural light within this circulation space that's required within a building, but allowing for that opportunity for people to actually use that as a communication stair between units. This is a view of the green terraces. And then finally, a shot that was shot last week, seeing the well on site. Thank you. So I'll pass it on to Adrian.
Thanks. Go ahead, Adrian. And I'm going to let everyone know it looks like we will not get to Q&A at the end. We do have a record of your questions, and we will see what we can do about addressing those at another time. Adrian, take it away.
Okay, I'll do my best to keep in time. Good afternoon, Toronto, and good evening from London. I'm Adrian Price. I'm an architect principal at a BDP based in London. And I'm going to talk to you about the retail design. So as Michael mentioned, our brief was not to create a mall. It was very much an urban streetscape, which was the inspiration. And really looking at the King West area of Toronto with these beautiful brick and beam former industrial buildings, there was our inspiration for this rich materiality that has been repurposed into a multitude of uses which give this very vibrant streetscape. The client, as Michael had mentioned, had been to the UK, and they particularly were struck by one of our previous projects in the top left, Victoria Square, Belfast, which has a variety of buildings that engage with a curved street covered by a canopy that melts into its context. And we also were quite inspired by this image of Shad Thames with these bridges crossing this narrow space. So every good retail project needs a good retail diagram. The key here was in plan to capitalize on the high footfall that we expected from Spadina and front through the spine. And so we introduced the idea of anchors at both ends, including a destination food hall of the lower level. And we also took the 2 levels above ground and extended it to a third below grade. So effectively creating 2 ground levels served by urban staircases. But like any multi-level retail scheme, you need to optimize the footfall to all levels. So we introduced a number of tricks like fast up escalators and strategic location of all the vertical circulation aspect, as well as providing footfall from the offices at the upper level and car parking below. In terms of an architectural strategy, we were primarily concerned with 6 blocks, A to F, and we devised this idea to create individuality with these buildings by starting with a very simple industrial sort of aesthetic akin to the brick and beam buildings surrounding in the King West area, and gradually getting more refined as it went through the blocks. With more sophisticated use of materials until you get a very refined civic quality onto Front Street. And of course, all of these buildings were connected by these metal bridges, which gave this very dramatic internal character. Materiality was incredibly important to this project. And I think when you visit it, you'll be struck by the richness of the materials. We have this terracotta palette, as I say, starting with with simple brickwork, then introducing long bricks, textured bricks, stack bonded bricks, terracotta panels, and finally a a terracotta-coloured rain screen for Building F. And the way the buildings were either ground at the lower ground or sitting on a brick plinth also gives this variety to the internal spaces. So I'm just going to quickly run through, a series of CGIs and some construction photographs of the project. You've seen this before. This is the front and Spadina entrance. Making a strong entrance is incredibly important. The retail is brought right to the fore with a Adidas store on the corner with a digital video screen, which you should be able to see from Union Station. As you enter this space, it's a dramatic double height space with those mega floor slabs above you. What you see there in front of you is this fast up escalator that can take you straight to the second floor, or you have the decision to move through at the ground level or descend a staircase to the lower ground level. And when you do that, you really get this idea of retail theatre. So this is a view on the left of the lower level. You have 3 levels unfolding above you with this curved street fall, which should be quite unique in Toronto. On the left is the food market, 75,000 square feet, with the retail on both sides. And you see those metal bridges crossing over the space and topped by this glazed roof canopy, which is quite unique in its form. And you see on the right, there's a sort of fairly recent construction photograph. The same view, but from the second floor, as if you've come out from the office that Michael's just been describing. You see this same view, but looking, at the upper level, looking west towards the destination space and the anchors at the other end. And if you go right the way to the end of the spine at the lower level, you'll see this streetscape unfolding in front of you. And part of this is actually currently just open to the public to access one of the units which was opened up. And the finale really is a space known as Crown Square. This is a space that you descend urban staircases both ends. And these staircases have amphitheatre-style seating so that people visiting can watch performances, concerts, street theatre, and really engage with this space very much as you do in Covent Garden in London. And of course, that's topped by this dramatic roof canopy. And I'll just finish off with the canopy itself. I think in all of our retail projects, we like to leave the visitor with something memorable. And I think in the case of the Well, the canopy really is the sort of standout feature I hope that people remember. At 35,000 square feet, it's probably one of the biggest umbrellas in North America, which is trying to keep the worst of the weather off, but you'll certainly still need your coat on in winter. So it's been a pleasure to be involved with such an amazing project, and I hope you enjoy this scheme once it's fully open later on this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, everybody, for the participation today. As I said, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to the question and answer period right now, but we do have a record of those, and we'll see what we can offer. This webinar is being recorded. Anybody who has signed up will get a link later on so that they can revisit this online. We just want to say thank you to everybody, both the participants and the audience, for coming today. We'll look forward to whatever contributions you might make to the Urban Toronto thread as you gradually explore the Well as it opens up more and more across the rest of the year. And that's that. Thank you very much.